Jewish Gangster really had a need, a psychological need, to show that the Jews could be just as tough as any other ethnicity, because they were going to break with the 2,000 years of our heads down, living in the ghetto, living fearful. Meyer Lansky, the first thing he says, you know, your dad was a very good friend of mine. My father's original partners were the bosses of the Jewish mob. Abner Longy Swillman, he was the godfather of the Minutemen, the organization of Jewish guys that took on the American Nazi Party in Newark, New Jersey. And Meyer Lansky says this is going to be resolved with Jewish fists. My father said to me, how would you like to develop an export business? I said, I'd love it. I was the biggest contrabandist and bootlegger of Valley bingo machines. All of a sudden, I'm the godfather of the slot machine business. My name is on everybody's list. So money became a prime factor in the pursuit of Nazi war criminals. Every week, we sent very generous amounts of money to Wiesenthal. Every time he would come to New York, the first guy that he would call would be me. There are consequences when you go into this world.
I got shot, yeah.
Who got shot? You? You're dealing with very, very extreme personalities.
Most murders were committed on this street in all the United States, right here.
My name is Myron Sugerman, and I'm the last man standing.
What's up, everybody? This is Simon. On this episode of the Ideal Hour, I have a very special guest, Myron Sugerman. He is actually the last Jewish gangster with ties to Meyer Lansky. He was brought to America at a very young age. He had to deal with antisemitism. Growing up as a Jewish gangster in New Jersey, this is going to be an incredible story of how the mob was, how it was like being Jewish back then, and we're going to talk about being Jewish now and everything in between. Myron, thanks so much for coming on the Ideal Hour. I'm so excited.
Very good. Let me just make a little slight correction. My father was born in Newark, New Jersey. His parents came from Europe. They came from Russia, and my mother's family came from Romania. I'm second generation born in America, 1938, Newark, New Jersey. And of course, people will say, are you really the last gangsters? Well, the last Jewish gangster of the era of Meyer Lansky and that world. That's a very specific world. There's a cutoff point with me, and we'll talk about the question of the Jewish mob. So, Simon, what I want to tell you is like this. I want to tell you, and I'm going to tell your audience, that your listening audience, that while I'm telling the story of the Jewish gangster, the history of the Jewish gangster, you have to keep in mind my theory or my observation that a Jewish gangster and a Jewish patriot really had the same mindset. There was no difference in the mindset between a Jewish gangster and a Jew, meaning that if a Jew that was born and raised in Palestine, pre-state Israel, if he would have been born and raised in the United States instead, would have been a gangster. And by the same token, the gangster would have been a patriot, had his circumstances been that he was born and raised in Palestine, in pre-state Israel. The mindset is one and the same. There was something that needed to be proven by the Jewish gangster in terms of his relationship with the non-Jewish world, the non-Jewish gangster. And that was, the Jew is just as tough and just as capable, just as competent as the non-Jew. The difference being that in the case of the Jew and some of the others as well, the Greeks, the Albanians, and so forth, we were one generation cultural in terms of living outside the law. Whereas in the case of the Italians, they created something for posterity. They were hoping that this would go on from now until the last day of eternity. Whereas the Jews had a completely different philosophy. Our philosophy was simply the case of creating the Jewish underworld for purposes of expediency. Make the money and then invest it legitimately, and then send your kids out to higher education, so that they could become anything but gangsters. All right. In reality, I was really part of a gang, no ands, ifs, and buts about it. However, I was strictly the gentleman businessman. I was the producer. I had the vision to go ahead and to create business for gambling machines from one end of the world to the next. And so part of it, or a great deal of it, part of it was involving shipping, doing business in overseas, and more importantly, doing business in New York, New Jersey, in the metropolitan New York, New Jersey area. And that gave me the reputation of being the boss of the king of the gambling machine business. And everybody came looking to me for sources of supplies, counsel, advice, et cetera, et cetera. Now, once you cross the line and you're in the illegal business, then you're subject to a new government. It's not just the government of the United States, the Internal Revenue Service, and your security organizations and so forth. You're now answering to a new government, and that government needs to be paid. And by the same token, they have to reciprocate. They got to give you the necessary protection. You're paying for it. They have an obligation. The obligation is not just take your money and screw you. Their obligation is to make sure that, particularly if you're a big earner and you're fair in terms of your the amount of income tax that you pay. All right. So there's an obligation on their part to protect their interests. So what's the questions today?
You grew up, obviously, during a very tough time already, and your father, Barney Sugerman, was nicknamed Sugie, a prominent gangster in the 20s as well.
I wouldn't call him a prominent gangster. He was exactly what I am. He was a businessman, connected, very, very well connected, very well respected. And he was a businessman. I mean, particularly, he was active during the Prohibition, during alcohol and so forth. And then after alcohol and the repeal of the Volstead Act, then he went into the jukebox and gaming and amusement business, which was probably a mob-connected business. So, I mean, it was an issue. The machines making money, the territory, the locations, who owns, whose location is it? And of course, that meant force and power. All right.
Would you say you followed in his footsteps? Because
very much so. Very much. I graduated college in 1959, June of 1959. By September of 1959, I showed my father that there was a tremendous potential for exporting machines overseas, and I started to get involved in the export business. And I traveled the world, 55 to 70 countries, lived there all over the world, ran gambling all over the world, knew street bosses from one end of the world to the next. And it was a great life, a great run. And I learned a lot.
When you were growing up Jewish in New Jersey, was it tough to be Jewish and be a tough guy, or was it respectful?
Of course, we took boxing lessons. We went for boxing lessons. Yes, there was an element of anti-Semitism, no ands, ifs, and buts. Not the interesting is that in New Jersey, Newark, New Jersey. So if I mention the name of Abner Longies-Wilman, nobody knows the name. If you weren't from Newark, New Jersey, you did not know Abner Longies-Wilman. He was the equal partner with Meyer Lansky, Benny Siegel, and others in terms of because the Jews were powerful, very, 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 very effective, very powerful. They not only had shooters, they not only had tough guys and so forth. But Jews have a natural propensity for money making. We created Vegas, we created Cuba, the Bahamas, and so forth. And there's many businesses that I created throughout the entire world. Wow. And so there's a need for somebody that is capable of earning to associate with people that can protect them. It's a dog eat dog world, and you have to know the rules, the regulations, the customs, the traditions, and believe it or not, you got to keep control over the ego, and greed. What we learn is that greed in that world kills more people, kills more guys than bullets. It's an extremely interesting kind of a life, an extremely interesting world. It's stressful. You're never allowed the privilege of going to sleep at night with both eyes closed.
And let me ask you, was your father part of the New Jersey mob, the Jewish
Very
mob?
much, very, very much so. Very, very much so, because he was an earner, a visionary, and he was very trusted. He was a very, very special guy.
And you mentioned you guys were big in the slot machines in the world, in fact. And
my father's business was jukeboxes, vending machines, pinball machines, arcade machines, and so forth. He actually didn't go into. Of course, he was involved in street gambling going back to the time of prior to Mayor LaGuardia of New York, who banned the machines in 1941. Basically, music was a tremendous business. Jukeboxes, every saloon, every bar, every gin mill had a jukebox, had a pinball machine, had a pool table, a coin operator pool table. So he was very, very active as far as that was concerned. But he didn't really get into the slot machine business until they manufactured, until a group bought the Valley Manufacturing Company in 1960, 61 or 62 or 63. My father passed away in 64. My mother sold out. I was on my own. By the 60s, after my father passed away, I started to go all over the world, created businesses throughout the entire world.
Did you use his connections to basically network throughout there, or how did you get involved with someone like Meyer Lansky and others with your idea?
That's interesting. I'm thinking to how to exactly answer it. Part of it, half of it, was through father's connections. The other half was that I created my own. And at a certain point, nobody remembered my father, and I was way out there all by myself. And then you become to a certain extent well known throughout the entire world because you got a reputation. And people say, "Oh, I know the guy. Sure, he opened up in Puerto Rico. I knew him from Puerto Rico. I knew him from Argentina. I even knew him from Antwerp, Belgium, Lagos, Nigeria." So I was all over the world and created my own reputation.
That's incredible. And I'm sure you've met people and were respected all over the world.
The only time I actually ever met Meyer Lansky was in September 1970, prior to my going to Africa to run slot machines for Valley Manufacturing Company. They opened up a Panamanian corporation, and they were running slot machines in third world nations. They made a deal with a couple of Arabs from Nigeria, a couple of Arab gangsters, and they needed somebody to be the manager. So I was appointed manager, and I went to Nigeria. But before I went to Nigeria, a month before, I went to Tel Aviv, Israel, and I had to make a trip around Europe to pick up monies from people that owed me monies before I go to Africa. So I was in Israel, and Doc Stature is a name that you'll find in Google. He was on an equal level again with Abner Logies-Willman, Doc Stature, Benny Siegel, Meyer Lansky. Of course, there's others like Lepke Buchholter and Shapiro and Gura Shapiro and Dutch Schultz. In reality, Logies-Willman and Doc Stature were the original importers of alcohol during the time of Prohibition. Doc Thatcher accepted exile from the United States on a deal that he made with Robert Kennedy. Dropped tax charges, income tax evasion charges. If he would accept exile from the United States, he went to Israel. So one particular Shabbos lunch, Doc Thatcher told me he wanted to introduce me to a friend of his, and that's when I met Meyer Lansky. I spent the whole day talking to Meyer Lansky, and he wanted certain information that was not easily available at that time concerning Mr. Jerry Katina, who was the boss of the Genovese crime family, who was my father's partner in the jukebox and gaming business. I knew them all. I knew all the guys. Wilman, Doc Thatcher. I knew. I didn't know John Gotti. I knew Sammy the Bull. I knew what's his name, Frankie Loke. That was John Gotti's underboss that ended up going to jail together with John Gotti. Tommy Everly, tons. I knew tons of guys because I was the father of the gambling machine business, because I was born and raised in the business. I understood how to go ahead and create wealth for a lot of people.
And slot machines are a big business. I mean, you were probably a much higher earner than a lot of other individuals. I know, for example, Sammy the Bull has a YouTube channel now, and so does Michael Francis, who did the oil tax.
These guys were very smart. They reinvented themselves.
So with meeting Meyer Lansky, were you nervous? Were you?
No, same demeanor, same personality. And when you grow up with that world, you know, you're not. It was, you know. Of course, I was pleasantly surprised when he walked in, and Doc Thatcher says, "Meyer, say hello to Sugie's kid. This is Myron." And we had a nice conversation. Generally speaking, these people, they really, the level of conversation, you don't talk stupid. Yeah. The level of conversation has got to be on a an intelligent level. So we talked about Shabbos, we talked about Israel, about politics, about this, what, that, and so forth and so forth. He explained to me his circumstances, how he left the United States to go to Israel in order to avoid in order not to be indicted, and how the government made him bigger than Al Capone in the newspapers. And he gave me certain advices that, you know, if you see your name constantly appearing in the newspapers, well, that obviously that's the government presenting a case and so forth. And he was a proud Jew, very proud. We didn't get into the theological aspect of it, although the tables nearby were, I don't know if you're familiar with Orthodox, with traditions like Zemerot, Shabbos songs that are sung at the Shabbos table at lunch. And he really took great pride in listening to it and so forth. He was basically probably at most agnostic. He could, you know, like, he wasn't sure, and he was more cultural. He was Zionist. The creation of the state of Israel, a must. And he played a very significant role during the War of Independence to help create the state of Israel. All those gangsters, all those mob guys, every one of them, Doc Thatcher, Longies, Wilman, Hank Greenspun, David Berman, guys from Chicago, everybody, Hai Lanner from Panama, everybody played a significant role in either buying up weapons, shipping weapons, using the connections with the longshoremen in New York to send contraband weaponry.
Incredible. It's incredible how much the mob played in the development of not only America, but the world.
That brings up a very good point, Simon, that you just made. Let's expand this discussion and talk about not just what the mob did, creating Las Vegas entertainment and so forth, alcohol, a million things that they got involved in. But And they really did, in a very interesting way, make America a great place. However, today, America is not a great place for the Jews.
No.
All right. And in the time of the 1930s in Newark, New Jersey, which was a battleground, there was an American, there was the head of the American Nazi Party. His name was Fritz Kuhn, Kuhn. He came from Germany, and he recruited a lot of American Nazis out of both German-born and Americans, and they formed what was known as the American Nazi Party. And Newark, New Jersey was a huge battleground. There's a book called The Nazis in Newark, written by a friend of mine, Warren Grover. I took him 1997. I introduced him to all my father's friends that were involved in an organization that was called the Minutemen. It was under the jurisdiction, under the leadership of two men, Abner Longies Willman, the great gangster that I was telling you about, who was known as the Al Capone of New Jersey, and a former prize fighter by the name of Nat Arno. They were all friends of my father's. All of the every one of them knew my father. My father, of course, was involved with it, but not in the actual street battles. But he was a connection guy. Call this guy, take care of this, and so forth and so forth. Judges, lawyers, and so forth. But everybody participated. Prize fighters, former prize fighters, factory workers, dock workers, and so forth. So they fought with the American Nazi Party, beat the shit out of them during the 1930s. Newark was a major battleground because Newark was originally a large German community, going all the way back to the 1830s, 1840s. Newark, New Jersey was known as one of the biggest beer producers, manufacturers, breweries. The water was good for beer. A German community of both Jews and non-Jews, German Jews and German non-Jews. And there was no problem. Of course, the problem began with the defeat of the Kaiser Wilhelm and the Austro-Hungarian Empire. You had a lot of Germans that came here, and Fritz Kuhn played on those sentiments, something like what you've got today. Now, if you go to Google, you'll see that in 1939 at Madison Square Garden, winter of 1939, there were 25,000 Nazis, American members of the Nazi Party, that showed up at Madison Square Garden and to listen to Fritz Kuhn. So again, if you're comparing it with today, we don't see any ending right now as far as this crap that's going on at universities throughout the entire United States. But the American Nazi Party dissolved December the 7th, 1941, with the bombing of Pearl Harbor. 2 days after the Roosevelt declared war on Japan, declared war on the United States of America. He declared war, and that was something that Roosevelt really wanted, so that we could go to war and get out of the Depression.
How did the Nazi Party dissolve? Did the government take a big stance on them, or?
So that basically dissolved because they took Fritz Kuhn, and he was charged with embezzlement or something like that. But probably he was framed. I don't know. But during the 2 months after the war was declared, there was an explosion in the port of New York. There was a very famous ship called the SS Normandy. And the SS Normandy was a French luxury ship that was going to be refitted by the American government in order to send military to Europe. Mysteriously blew up in the harbor of New York. Go to Google, you'll find that as well. And the Department of the Navy, Charles Heffernan was an intelligence officer. The Department of Navy suspected that this was a result of espionage and sabotage. Charles Heffernan reached out to an attorney by the name of Moses Polikoff. Moses Polikoff was the attorney to Lucky Luciano and to Meyer Lansky. A deal was worked out where the government solicited the help of the longshoremen, which was under the control of the mafia, to be protect against sabotage and espionage of German saboteurs. The longshoremen were basically two ethnicities, mostly Italians or Irish. And the fear of the longshoremen and the fear of the government was that the Italians might be pro-Mussolini, and the Irish might be anti-English, and so they would not cooperate. On the contrary, but there was no further incident in the time of the war. Ultimately, Thomas Dewey, who was the chief prosecutor of the mob in the 1930s in New York, he ultimately accepted a deal. He became governor of the state of New York, and he issued a governor's pardon to Lucky Luciano, who was on the condition that he wouldn't remain in the United States. He was compelled to go back to live in Sicily, where he came from. It's called Operation Underworld. I believe there's a book called Operation Underworld written by somebody by the name of Campbell.
You mentioned earlier that obviously you've dealt with a little bit of anti-Semitism back then, and today it's even crazier with what's going on with the indoctrination of the universities. I'm
afraid to tell you, Simon, that I believe that we're no longer welcome in the United States of America. We're seeing what this is happening right now. No, America loves Hamas and hates Jews.
And they hate America as well. So they're showing no pride, not only for...
But I want to see America respond, and it's not responding. The Jews we're responding. We're scared shit. I mean, I've gone to rallies and so forth, and I've talked to the kids in school. They're completely frightened and panicked. They don't know, with the exception of what happened yesterday in California. You saw our guys go there, beat the crap out of these guys.
Yeah. Oh yeah, they went in UCLA. You're talking about, correct?
So that was terrific. Now I've also gotten a call from my nephew from Israel, who was he fought 5 wars as a tank commander. And he told me that the word on the streets are that there are veterans from Israel who are willing to pay their own expenses to come to America.
Myron, it's incredible how America and the government allows for this type of behavior, or how it's even allowed.
They hate Jews, and they hate America. Okay, so we're responding. Jews are responding. Where is America? Why isn't all those thousands of people that support Trump use them? Let Donald Trump tell them, you guys go to, I'm ordering you to go to a pro-Israel rally. Could you imagine the impression that it would make? One thing I learned as far as the rallies are concerned, if we show up outnumbering the enemy, it's smoke and mirrors. They're scared out of their wits. They're going to lay down their weapons, lay down their Palestinian flags, and they're going to surrender.
It's like hyenas. They attack in numbers, and when the lions show up, they're backing down.
So we need an overwhelming show, and we're not getting it from our Jews. Unfortunately, last week when I went to the University of Columbia rally, there were only 1,500 of us, and most of those Jews were Russians and Israelis. I wasn't finding support from the Americans.
The American Jews, for some reason, are almost like self-hating Jews in some way.
Too comfortable.
Yeah, it's weird. It's weird. And I'm in the Bay Area, which they're even on the complete other spectrum. I mean, I've seen Jews carry, pro-Hamas things, which is just incredible. Yeah. Pro-Palestine or whatever. And to me, it doesn't make sense because, they would exterminate you. We've seen even weirder. It's like queers for Hamas. It's like, do you realize what they would do to you in out there? They would shred them.
And tell them from now until the cows come home, they're going to still carry it. The reason they don't really understand or particularly care what the philosophy or the principles of Hamas are, they hate Trump. The American Jew, 80% of the American Jew suffers from an illness that's called in Hebrew sinat, means faceless hatred. There's no logic to it. It's hate just for the sake of hating. So people, if you're going to hate our enemies. But these people hate Trump. Thank God, distinguishes between the 80% that hate him and the 20% plus the 100% of Israelis that love him. He's not blaming the Jews of the United States by saying, I owe you nothing. So, but and by the way, when it comes to the question of appearing at rallies, it's interesting that the 20% people are the ones that show up at the rallies. It's not the 80% that hate Trump. They're just not at this particular point. And I have people tell me, please don't discuss politics. Don't get involved. Keep politics out of it. I try to do my best that I possibly can, but I just cannot fathom or understand this attitude vis-a-vis Trump. Okay.
It's crazy. They truly, it's like, it's baseless. Like you said, it's baseless hate.
Sinat Chinim. Our sages tell us that Sinat Chinim was the cause for the destruction of both the first temples and the second temple. All right. First temple, 586 before the Common Era by the Babylonians. And the Romans destroyed the second temple in the year 70.
It's really interesting why these kids act out. There's a video about Russian subversion, how the Russian government they talked about, and you may be able to YouTube this or search for it, Russian subversion, how they said, the KGB officer said that in 2 generations, they could convince through education or through indoctrination, the population that facts and common sense are no longer applied. You can't reason with people that are for 2 generations potentially trained or educated in something so radical that they don't understand reality from, what's not real, or fact from something that's baseless. And if you haven't seen it, Myron, definitely check it out. I think that's what's happening in our schools. It's where these kids are so educated in one thing that, they feel guilty for whatever that they have in America, that they're going out and they're acting in a way that's completely baseless, completely, irrelevant to the student that's next to them to have a cause that they're fighting for, supposedly. So check that out. So my next question is, do you think it was worse growing up with anti-Semitism when you grew up, or is it far much worse today?
What you're seeing right now is equivalent to Germany 1938, or to an uprising which very few people really know the history of. But in Baghdad, Iraq, 1941, it was called Farhud, Farhud. They killed Jews. It was 1941. It's just an overnight uprising, and they started to kill Jews left and right. Now, the Germany, this is Germany 1930s. Equal.
And you know what? I posted a video yesterday about someone undercover going to a San Francisco State University, and they said, we're doing a fundraiser so we could kill Jews and blow up their cafes and this and that in San Francisco. Will you donate money? And these idiot students or kids there, young adults, were like, sure, I'll donate $10. I'll donate $20. I mean, it's mind-blowing.
It's a pretty good racket. You go around and tell people you're going to kill Jews, you're going to get rich.
That is crazy. All right, let's talk about also what it was like to be a Jew and dealing with Italian mafia. You mentioned Mussolini earlier in the podcast. Obviously, I saw a video in Italy. They're doing the Nazi salute, even as of recent as this week, where there's a group of fascists that are...
fascists. The north of Italy was always fascist. There was no fascists couldn't survive in southern Italy. They're anti-authority. They could give 2 shits. But my relationship with the Italians, everybody was a good relationship. Dominicans, Puerto Ricans, Cubans, Russians, Greeks, Armenians, Albanians. We have Irish. We had all kinds of people that we did business with. Blacks. People are people. You're in business. If you make people, you can help make people wealthy. You can help them to enrich their lives. All right. and you're smart about it, they'll take care of you. You'll make money. They'll make money.
Which were the different types of people that you were more worried about, or like what was a more dangerous mob back then, where you had to be very
That's all
cautious?
nonsense. Everybody is dangerous. Everybody can be dangerous. Anybody. Look at people. People are people. People. There's no such thing as how you rated these people. But this mob was so forth and so forth. They're bigger. They're smarter, richer, tougher, more homicidal. No, they're all people are people.
When you did deal with any of them, they didn't care that you were Jewish, did they, back then?
They loved it.
They love that because you know how to make money. That's, you know,
They're gonna be, and I had a reputation for being a fair guy. I wasn't greedy.
I love that. I think greed is the one thing you mentioned earlier.
Greed kills more people than bullets.
The mob obviously helped start Las Vegas. They had some footprints in Lake Tahoe, for example, Nevada.
Everything. They created Vegas, of course.
Do you think America was better off when the mob was around?
That's a very good question. Yeah, I would say that probably there's pros and cons. Neighborhoods were safe. Neighborhoods in the city were safe. The social clubs took care of the neighborhoods. The idea of the mob, something that was relevant for that time period as far as history is concerned. Maybe there's no need for a mob today. Do the people have the ability to understand? No, I think it's an institution that's being superseded by advancement in technology, everything else that's going on in the world today. Friends of mine got locked up. They got busted recently for what? For operating some video games in a shoe store, in a shoe repair store. Whatever is left, the government finds that easy pickings. They're not going after the Hamas. They're not going after insurrection. They're not going after what needs to be going after. They actually prosecuted some guys that were operating some video poker machines in the back room of a shoe repair store. That more or less, that it's a metaphor for what's taking place today.
Yeah, their attention's in the wrong area.
Well, not only that, it also at the same time they're saying, this is easy pickings. Let me get rid of these guys. All right, I got something. I got to do something and also at the same time, there's a need for the mob to understand that it's all over. There's no place for your 70s when I started the gambling machine business. There was a need for it. People were paying off their kids' education. They were paying off their mortgages. They're paying their car payments, their education, and so forth and so forth, with monies that were coming from the machines.
That's crazy. Does the mob exist today at all in Jersey?
A shadow of what it once was.
And you feel like technology obviously played a big part, and you're saying that they need to.
Technology changes all of our thinking. When I was a kid, nobody was walking around with an iPhone. You're not talking to people. You're talking, you're on an iPhone.
Do you think a mobster has to kind of grow up or had to grow up and become a CEO, so to speak, and convert, which they were technically CEOs back then, just running illegal ops in some cases, right? Or what the government did.
Without a doubt. What needs to be done is education. You're not going to get education in colleges today, that's for sure. You're going to wind up being a socialist with your head up your ass.
Do you think there's any chance to stop the socialism that's going on in these universities? I mean,
that's what people want who support Trump. They're the ones that believe that he's the only one that can stop it and reverse it.
Do you think it's possible?
If he gets elected, he's going to have a very, very difficult time because he's going to have to. He's going to have to be 2 times Trump. Going to be tremendous resistance from the leftists, from the left liberal politicians. They're going to do everything to undermine him.
They will. They're going to stand in his way. Do you think, in terms of politics, Obviously, New Jersey, New York is on the left side. Do you think DeSantis would be a potentially good president in the future?
Excellent, excellent.
I agree with that. I think his values.
Now, yeah, he made, however, a serious mistake by announcing himself as president. As a candidate for president. He didn't talk to me. If he would have spoke to me, where you going? Go take a break. Go smoke a doobie.
Take a vacation. What out of these places that you travel to, what are your favorite places? You mentioned Cuba. I've always wanted to go to Cuba. I know there's a big.
I never went to Cuba. My father went to Cuba. And my brother went to Cuba because my father was. They were older. My brother was older than me. He went at the time before Castro came to power. My father was an investor in the Riviera Hotel. So I've been all over the world. Argentina, everywhere's is great. Where you got friends, it's great. Where you got nice people, take you out, take you for dinner, explain to you the history. Go on the water, look what's going. Look at the sea, look at the fields, talk to the people, and learn the language. I speak quite a few languages.
Did you ever miss the United States while traveling?
No, not at all.
Being in a illegal slot business, or maybe I don't know how legal it was or the semantics of it. And obviously, it was underground at first. Did you ever get in trouble? Were you ever worried about the FBI? Were you worried about
I had 3 state cases, 3 federal cases, and I did jail time.
How long was your jail time?
I did 19 months federal, then 3 months, 2 months halfway house, 2 months home confinement. Then I had 3 years probation. I had a lot of trouble in my life, a lot of, but I was defiant. Quite a story, but when I think about it, I myself don't understand myself.
No one understands the things that we do, but we do them, and it's. But you have an interesting story. I mean, I'm truly enjoying this podcast.
And while I was doing all this, I was very close to Simon Wiesenthal.
Yeah, I was going to ask about him. Tell me about your relationship.
I volunteered my services when I was 26, 27 years of age. And they would give me assignments to go see people throughout South America. I raised a lot of money for him. I was very close to him. And he taught me Holocaust. That's the reason why, if I say to you today, this is Germany, 1930s. This is not just any Johnny-come-lately telling you the story. I was very close to Simon Wiesenthal. It was, I would almost say, a little bit of a father-son relationship.
Like his personality, like seriousness, or was he?
Yeah. And the personalities, because he was a little bit different in the sense that their lives were different in that he survived the concentration camps, and he was destined to die, and a minute before dying 4 different times, he was pulled from the ranks to do some work. That saved him.
Did you learn from him, and what are some of the messages that he was able to bestow and carry on through you or with you?
There were 2 sides to Simon Wiesenthal. He was known as a man who pursued justice. All right? Go through the process, submit it to the courts, prosecution, and so forth. The other side of Simon Wiesenthal was, if it was up to him, he'd kill every fucking Nazi on the face of the earth. That was the private Simon Wiesenthal, which nobody else knew. I may have revealed it to others. I never heard anybody else know it the way I know him.
And if he was alive, is he alive today? I don't know.
He died in 2005.
If he was alive today, what would his message be?
Go to the airport, buy a ticket for El Al, one way. Goodbye, America.
Get the hell out of America. So you don't see America changing and putting a stop.
Only for the worse.
That's not good. That is not good.
Not at all. Not at all. I don't see any signs of any reasons for optimism.
And even if you do get, let's say, Trump in this case, who I'm actually supporting as well, is it too late, or is it just not enough time to turn things around?
No, I don't have the crystal ball, but I do. This is horrible. What's going on? I mean, I don't have to dramatize it. Every university throughout the United States of America today hating Jews
Even Florida, I've seen, which was incredible.
everywhere. There's no exception to the rule.
Yeah, and you know what's scarier is these kids grow up to be adults, and then one day they're the political leaders and the ones making the government decisions. Our generations die out with normal thinking, in my opinion. Their generation becomes the dominant generation.
I don't know what the future is going to bring for these kids today. I don't know. One of the things that I've always felt was unfortunate circumstances that during the Vietnam War, Nixon had to make the decision to cancel conscription. We had conscription all our lives, all through American history. And the draft is going to the military. It teaches military discipline, patriotism. We don't have that. It's all finished.
If you could go back in time and give yourself advice or give yourself any type of direction or change things, what would some of those things be?
Probably no change at all.
And what advice would you give yourself?
The second bite at the apple, say to God, let's do it now. Let's rerun with everything that I know today. I probably would lock myself in a closet and never come out. I lived a life of extreme stress, a lot of adventure, a lot of risk taking. And the reason today that I can give great wisdom, although that might sound terribly immodest, but let's not play pretend humility. Let's get right to the bottom line. We have an expression in Hebrew that goes, "Ein chacham kemo nisayan." There's no wisdom without human experience. And since I've had an extensive amount of human experience, I'm in a position to dispense a lot of wisdom. So if people were to call me and say to me, certain circumstances and seek my counsel, I could probably give great advice. I couldn't give great advice to myself. All right. I had to put my hand on the stove and get it burned in order to find out that, the stove burns.
But you learned. I mean, that's, I think those life lessons are sometimes
one of the greatest pursuits of knowledge. We're lucky, we're Jewish people, and that's really the study of Torah. It's an amazing study. The study of Torah and Talmud and Gemara and Mishnah and Midrashic literature and all the rest of that stuff. It's a fantastic study.
I need to study up more. Everybody, there you have it. Myron Sugerman. He was an ex-mobster, gangster, grew up second-generation Jew, created a lot of businesses, has a lot of stories for us. We'll link all of your information below, Myron, in case anyone ever has any questions for some of that wisdom. I truly appreciated this podcast and you sharing not only your journey, but also what it was like being a Jew in the mob. Anything you want to add?
The other thing, there's a documentary about me. They can go to Amazon Prime. It's called Last Man Standing. And there's a book that's called the Chronicles of the Last Jewish Gangster, from Meyer to Myron.
I got to check that book out. And I'm sure that book's on Amazon as well.
Yeah.
Perfect. We'll link those below. Any snippet from the book of any fun story with any gangsters you want to share or any life experiences?
Well, it's a million stories.
Well, which one comes to mind? A good one.
Years ago, when I came out of jail, my guys were operating a game called the Quarter Horse Machine in Brazil. So it wasn't making any money, and I said, that's strange because it's a great game. Brazilians love the horse game. So I asked my guys, who's the boss of Brazil? They told me that there was a Lebanese Christian by the name of Antonio Khalil from Rio, from outside of Rio, Niterói. Okay. I said, make an appointment for him. I'd like to meet the man. So I flew. They told me, gave me a date, such a date, come down, you meet the man. So I flew down and I meet him. He was wearing a nice jacket, looking, business meeting. It was a morning breakfast, cup of coffee. He shows up in shorts, slippers. I don't think the outfit that he had on was $6. And I said, okay. We have coffee. We talk. Big guy. And talked about Trump because he liked to gamble in Trump's casinos. We talked about Las Vegas. He liked to gamble in Vegas. We talked about the Dominican Republic because he liked to gamble in the Dominican Republic. Who do you know in the business, back and forth. We talked a little bit about his love for football, young girls. Okay, very good. Finally, he says, so what do you want? What are you here for? I said, well, I'll tell you what. I own the quarter horse machine. He said, you own it? I said, yeah. Nobody else has got it? No, I got the exclusive. I said, he says, I told him, I says, here's what I need. I don't need your money. I need your market. I need your judges, your cops, your robbers, your thieves, your drug dealers not to bother me. I want to put my machines into all of the shanty town, for what they call favelas, throughout Rio de Janeiro. We'll operate the machines. And I'll tell you right now, I'll give you the lion's share of the income. So he looks at me and he says, thinks for a few seconds. Then he says to me, I like you. Stick out your mitt. Put out my hand. Shook. Never another word of business. That contract was better than all the contracts ever made by a zillion lawyers. And my guy Rudy, before he died, I was talking to him one day. I said, Rudy, what was the percentage? He said, we gave they call him the Big Turk, El Turcon. They gave him 65%. We took 35%. With 35%, we got rich. So people ask me later when I tell the story, how come you gave him 65%? Because he gave you full 1,000% protection. Nobody ever got robbed. No machine ever got stolen. Nobody they never touched their hair on the head. What you have to understand as far as life is concerned, to make a deal and to be fair. And that's business in our world, all right? Of course, in a legitimate world, they sit down, everything's got to be according to the oil and so forth. But our standards, you're measured very, very benevolently when you're not greedy. But the reason guys get killed is because they get greedy.
I love it. I think what you did and what sums it up is sometimes you're thinking, I'm going to make more money on the beginning negotiation. But in reality, you made it worthwhile for the other individual to make sure it makes money, and he enjoyed every bit of it.
We had a very good relationship. I used to go once a year to Rio to visit him, go to his house. His wife would make fish because she knows this I'm kosher. And I would bring her records of she loved Billie Holiday. All right.
Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you sharing that story. Everybody, Myron Sugerman will share all of his info. Thank you for taking the hour, Myron. I appreciate you. You have my contact, anything you ever need.
All the best, son. God bless you.